The Graphic Histories Podcast.
I got bit by a radioactive bug. I tried an experimental drug. Went up for a stroll on a gamma testing range. I found an enchanted hurricane. I made a serum that made me small. I modified the serum so it would make me tall. Radioactive isotope in my eyes. Dying alien helped me accessorize. I gained the proportion and strength of a spider. Now I'm invincible and I can fly. I lost my sight, my other senses were heightened. I'm gonna put on my pajamas and go fight crime.
Hey there and welcome to the Graphic Histories Podcast. My name is André. I will be your podcast host. And big thanks to Uka the Mock for our theme song, Superpowers. And big thanks to you, gentle listener, for tuning in once again to another action-filled, fun-packed, crazy show. It's not super crazy. It's pretty standard, actually. It's kind of what we always do, which is talk to some cool people about some cool stuff. And today's guest is Kalman Andrasofszky, as he taught me how to pronounce his name correctly during our speaking time. So it's good because I was worried that I would just have to call him Kalman and go no further because I didn't want to offend him or say it incorrectly. But he did teach me the correct way, as I'm told. He said it is made up of four words that you say every day: and, rush, off, ski. So Andrasofszky, which is Hungarian, as I learned. His father and is from Budapest. And it was really cool. Don't need to reveal any more. You need to listen to the episode to get the full story. Going on in the world at large, I have finished the play I was in when we did Happy Birthday 1 to June. Critically, from those who saw it, a lot of great reviews. Fortunately, not a ton of people came out, which is kind of the struggle when trying to do something different that I've rallied against. That we need to do more theater and different things. I mean, there's lots of room for fun comedies, but I really hope that we can grow an audience of people that appreciate something more, something deeper, and something that goes into, darker places. And not necessarily darker, but more complicated, I guess would be a better way. I hope you had a good Halloween, gentle listener. Mine was great. Me and my wife just hung out and watched some horror movies. So we watched a really cool movie called Ghost Watch. It's a British horror movie that was a TV movie that was presented as a news story. It was done as a news expose, and real newscasters from the BBC were in it playing themselves, basically, while one of their reporters, who is an actual reporter, was doing an investigation on a haunted house. And then it goes off from there. But it was so real at the time that actual viewers thought it was really happening. And I guess the BBC was flooded with hundreds of thousands of calls of people that thought what they were seeing was real. Does a very good job of presenting a cool, creepy little ghost thing. And it was well worth watching. I then went on to watch The Masters of Horror, which was an anthology TV series from 2005, where different horror creators would get an hour to do whatever stories they wanted. And John Carpenter had done 2 episodes, so I watched his 2 episodes, which were interesting. One called Cigarette Burns was the superior offering. The other one called Pro-Life, interesting, dark and weird, and really felt just sort of like a pay-for-hire job. I can't speak to it. I mean, I love John Carpenter. I don't want to offend him if he's listening. I'm sure he's listening. But I feel like Cigarette Burns was more what I expected from him. But, the other one was fun in its own right. It did have Ron Perlman in it, which is always a blast. Yeah, so just did that. No trick-or-treaters, sadly. And it's the bane of the people that live in the country here in the sticks. We don't always get a lot of kids, so maybe next year. In the meantime, I'll just have to eat all that candy myself. Hopefully you had a good one. You had lots of trick-or-treaters, or you got lots of candy yourself if you're so inclined. But otherwise, things are pretty straightforward here. Just going into the Christmas season and, getting ready for all that insanity. I do love Christmas, as I mentioned on the show before. One thing I'd like to discuss before I get into our talk with Kalman is Kalman told me he's a fan. He's a fan of the show. He's been listening to it for a while. I think the episode I had with Sean, or Word Burglar, was the one that brought him to the table, and he's been listening ever since and discovered friends of his have been on the show, people he's known, and further back, and got into it, which was very affirming to me. You do these sort of things for a while, years now for me, 3 actually, and you wonder how much of an impact you're having. And not that I need to change the world, but I would just hope that I have people out there that enjoy the episodes. And it sounds like I do, and people in high places, which is very cool. So I'm very thankful for him to be in the show, but I'm also thankful for him to bring me that information and kind of reaffirm that this path I'm walking is a good one, a righteous one, if you will. But Kalman was a great guest, and I don't need to prattle on much longer than I normally do I? Kalman's worked for, I forgot to talk to him about his Captain Canuck stuff, sadly, but maybe somewhere down the line we'll get to chat about that sometime. But he's done a lot of covers for Marvel, worked on Legion of Superheroes for DC, got to start with Caliber Comics, and went on to do some other work here and there. He also teaches and does illustration work on the side as well, so work for hire kind of stuff, but is very active in doing covers for Marvel Comics, which are all eye-poppingly beautiful. So I was very honored to have him on the show. We had a great conversation, and now you get to hear it. So here's my talk with Kalman Andrasofszky. Oh, hey.
Always forget to unmute that thing.
Sound like me, I do that too. Someone's like, I'm not hearing you. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, oh, right, of course. Hey, Kalman, thanks for being on the show. This is awesome.
The pleasure is mine. I'm a fan. I've listened to many episodes. Surprised to get the email about this. So,
really?
yeah.
Oh, man. Well, that what led you to the show? Was it when I had Ramon on, or?
No, I was surprised to find him in the back catalog. I think it was Word Burglar.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Do you know him well, or?
Yeah, very well. Known him for many years. We both worked at Silver Snail, but not at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just kind of friendly with him as a dude, and I knew he did hip hop, and I'd listen to like some nerdcore here and there, and I just never checked out his music until he put a CD in my hand, One Fan Expo, and he's like, "Yo, dude, I shout you out on this record," and I was like, "Okay," and I listened to it, and not surprising to you or anyone who's actually heard Bergie, he's really good.
Oh, he's fantastic.
I was like, I just thought you were a nice guy who kind of dabbled, but you are really effing good. And then he was super cool and let me do a cover for his last album.
Oh, you did the last one? That's awesome.
This seems rehearsed. It's not, I swear, but I have a little spinner rack of my shit here, and it's right there. So I did this one.
Oh, I have that one. That's fantastic. I didn't know that was you. That's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet. I have one. I collect records, so I have a few of his records. But I have one CD player in the house, and it's a record player that has one in it, and it's sitting beside it because it's the only place I can play it in the house. So it's fantastic. That's awesome.
I don't think that one's out on vinyl yet, but it's only a matter of time, I'm sure. Or maybe it is. No, it's not. Not yet.
I'd love to get. I think it's the Space Verse one he did. That one's like one of my favorites.
Yes,
I love
that
one.
might be my favorite too.
Yeah, I love everything, but that one is like for like the whole thing about Doctor Who is just stuck in my head. I love that song, and the Transformers one is so good. The Cybertronicer, so I don't know
all of it. I mean, the prior album is the one he put in my hand that knocked me on my ass. So that one will always be like the first one. But then Space Verse came out right after, and it was like next, even like one step up. That one.
Yeah,
I wish I'd done the cover to that, because then I could have done the cover to my favorite one. Not that Ergonomic is bad; it's really good. But as a nerd, the Space Verse pushes all the buttons. And Danny Zabal, another friend of mine who did that cover, just knocked it out of the park. So shade on anybody. It's all love over here.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, well, I was looking just when we were doing some research for the show. Obviously you're involved with the Raid Studios, so I figured you probably connected through Ramon. But then I also you probably know Dave Cutler too, who's a
I know Dave. Yeah, so I listened to that two-parter, which was great, really insightful chat.
Yeah, well, I really like that one as well.
Sorry, what?
I like that one a lot as well, especially since I was like, I've known Dave for years and he was my roommate for several of them, and I was like, you just learn a lot when you actually just sit and have a real conversation about someone's life.
Yeah, and I knew Dave through Drink and Draw in Toronto. So my studio mates Francis and Marcus had started a Drink and Draw, held in a bar called the Black Bull across the street from the Silver Snail. And this was, I don't know, 15 years ago. But it grew rapidly because a bunch of Max the Mutt kids heard about it, and so the entire graphic novel class or cohort started coming to this drink and draw, and that's where I met David originally. There was a bunch of heavy hitters in that lineup.
I know Adam Gorham, so that's how he got started, was going to those.
Yeah. And Mike Walsh, I don't think he went to Max the Mutt, but he came to the drinks and draws. But I'd known David for years, and I first of all didn't know he was Indigenous, so that was a surprise when I read that press bit. And then I didn't know he was from Newfoundland.
Oh, really?
Surprise when I heard your interview. So yeah, layers and layers. That guy's like, delightful, charming, chubby onion who draws really well.
That's a great way to describe him. I still think one of my favorite lines to ever come out of one of these episodes is when he said, like, when he found out he was Indigenous, he was like, it's like finding you out you come from a long line of putties, like just like the villains, like the nameless villains and everything you've watched, you're one of them. And like it was just such an eye-opening way to hear that phrased. I was like, well, that's amazing. Incredibly creative guy. I was really happy to meet him. I'm actually going to be, I haven't talked to him yet, but I think I'm going to be in Toronto in December, so I'm hoping to maybe catch up with some folks that I know up there, including himself, when I'm there. So
for sure, yeah, drop a line for sure.
Yeah, maybe we can get a little group together and meet somewhere or something. And one of my clients is a cannabis company, and there's a big conference going on they want me to do the social media stuff for, so I'll be on hand.
When is this going to be?
December 5th and 6th.
Okay, yeah, sure. Awesome. Let's do it.
I think I'm going to sneak up on the 3rd earlier, just so I can visit some other friends and hang out a little bit. So I love Toronto, but I never get to spend a lot of time there. So be nice to do that. I see the Trans-Siberian Orchestra. Do you know who they are?
I have heard of them. I've probably heard a song here or there, but I'm not deep familiar.
They used to do my wrestling theme song years ago.
Awesome.
They have a lot of famous Christmas albums, because they're like this like mixture of rock and like classical music. So like, when I was a heel character that was like a genius, my song was their version of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. So but the Christmas stuff's really cool, and I guess they're playing when I'm there, so I might try to sneak in and see that too. So.
Man, that you totally should.
Yeah.
So awesome. So just going back to your original question,
sorry.
Not Ramon that brought me to your show, but finding him in the back catalog was like going to a party where you don't think you know anybody, and then your buddies are.
Oh, that's awesome.
So that was a happy find too.
Cool. Well, you may be one of the first people I've had on that's someone that's been listening to the show, I guess I've had a few others on in the past, but as far as someone that I don't have a connection to in some other way that I'm meeting that listens to the show already. So that's awesome. That's very cool. I'm glad to hear folks are out there.
You do it long enough, you start to get fans, right?
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
It's like the first editor-in-chief at Marvel who actually read Marvel comics was like a moment where they were like, oh, this is a thing now,
Yeah.
You're a thing now.
Oh, well, I'll take it.
You have a guest that's a fan.
Oh, well, thanks, man. That means a lot.
You mentioned wrestling. Did you have Anthony Rutgazer on your show?
No.
Kingdom James?
No.
Okay, I had a weird memory. I thought maybe he was one of the other.
I tried to have,
and he's a wrestler.
Yeah.
So I flicked through the catalog trying to refresh my memory. Like, what did I listen to? I couldn't find it. Then you said I used to wrestle, so I was like, okay, he must have been on the show, but no, okay.
I still wrestle. It's not over yet. I'm still doing it, but I tried to have. It's okay.
Don't body slam me.
It's all good. I tried to have Andy Belanger on a couple times, but his schedule just never lined up. So maybe somewhere down the line, because he wrestles. He's like the Animorphs. So yeah, that's right.
So he would be a great guest. That guy can spin a yarn for sure, and also formerly of the Raid Studio.
Yes. And it was a Mother Truckers he's doing now. Is that the book? No. That's him, right? Yeah.
That's it. Fantastic. That's it,
yeah. So you're a native Torontonian?
Born and bred.
Wow, right in the
I never
city?
left the Shire, as some of my friends like to tell me.
I love the concept that Toronto is like a Hobbiton of sorts, just like a lot of people smoking pipe weed and chilling out all day.
I wish it was more chill. But maybe globally, maybe from if you squint, kind of, but definitely not compared to Canada, I guess. There are definitely more Shire-like areas of Canada than Toronto.
Well, I'd say where I'm from is a lot closer. Nova Scotia is a lot closer, I'd say. But Toronto is funny because it has like an interesting, not legend, but I guess like reputation, I suppose, depending on what parts of Canada you're from. You know, like I'm involved with the film industry, so I do some acting and stuff, and it's like obviously Toronto and like Vancouver, like the meccas for that sort of thing. But then if it's like, you know, the business side of things or all that other thing, it always sort of shifts. Like it's just different depending where you're from, which I find funny.
Yeah, I mean, Toronto came up in the 90s for movie production, and then government changed, tax breaks changed, and it vanished. And then it came back in 20 years later, and now it's a thing again. But in all that time, Vancouver has always kind of been because of its closeness to LA.
Yeah, California's just up the coast.
What do you do in the movie industry?
I'm an actor.
And that's separate from the cannabis gig, which is social media?
Yes, yeah. So I have my own business doing graphic design, website, social media, that sort of stuff.
Very cool.
I also have a bunch of side gigs, like I host trivia. I do some stage acting, which is just in a community theater group that I'm a part of. And that led me to doing some film stuff. Like I've been in a few movies, nothing huge, but like a Stephen King movie one time that got me my credits to be in the Union. And actually, a lot of Stephen King things from out here. A Stephen King TV show as well, which got me a few lines, and some background here and there. So yeah, you know, I try my hand at doing what I can. Although I have a distinctive look, so you know, I get a lot of like bouncers or skinheads or gang members or that sort of thing. So,
bikers, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. I remember when I was in one show. I think it was Mr. D. Is that what it was? I think it was. It's Jerry D, the comedian's show, and it was like they're in a skinhead bar, so I just had to like stand in the corner and look menacing, and someone had to like make a comment about a tattoo or something that they painted on me. So I don't know if it ever made it to the show. People are always saying that. They're like, "Yeah, I saw you on this thing." Like, it was that thing that came out recently. Oh, there's a show called From. It's like a horror show that's on Paramount, I think. And the guy from Lost and Oz is on it. Harold Perrineau.
Okay.
He's the guy in the wheelchair in Oz.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I know.
Yeah. So
it was Mercutio. And,
yes. Wow, that's a deep. I wouldn't call it a deep cut. I guess it's a popular movie, but it's not one that comes up that often. I guess when you think about him. But yeah, he was fantastic in that. He's also in like the Matrix movies, like maybe 2 and 3.
That's true. Yeah.
But
yeah, he's been a lot. Good actor.
Nice guy too. I met him briefly just doing background, but people are always like, "Oh, I saw you here and I saw you in this." And like, did you watch it? I'm like, no. They're like, why? I'm like, well, I actually do want to watch the show because it does look interesting, but it's like, you know, what am I going to do? Is just see a blurry version of me standing around in the background? Like, it's not that exciting. Like,
and in this case, the show might be awesome, but often the show might not be your thing. So then, what are you fast forwarding through episodes? Yeah. You catch it. Let's wait. What does that mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And there was some other show on Netflix, a movie I was in an airport. Someone spotted me and a bunch of people brought it up, and it's like, no, I'm not going to watch that show. It looks terrible. I don't want to watch it. So yeah, what was being raised in Toronto like?
Well, you're sort of asking a fish what water's like.
Oh, fair point.
Hard to compare. But I mean, I was always a city kid. Mm-hmm. So even though we didn't live downtown necessarily, we always lived like in the core, I guess, mm-hmm. or in Toronto proper. I don't know. I was a child of divorce. This is a very common origin story I'm discovering, mm-hmm. or have discovered over many mm-hmm. years of meeting mm-hmm. and talking to other creatives. Loneliness tends to be a really popular crucible for creativity and honing craft. And it doesn't really happen as much anymore. Kids aren't really left on their own the way we were in the 80s. But,
no.
My dad was in the picture, but I was raised in a single mom household, and she mm-hmm. worked so many, many hours after school alone with TV and cartoons and comics and all my drawing stuff sort of spread all out in the living room, just trying to make things up to make the desolate, slightly scary, lonely house feel a little better. And after years of that, I could do a thing. I could draw.
That's awesome.
I guess that's more like what was it like in your house than in Toronto, but
that's fair. No, but I guess that's a good way to word it.
You don't have much agency to run around when you're a kid, although I was probably on the subway on my own earlier than I should have been, because I had to go downtown to get comics.
Ah, excellent. So was Silver Snail your comic destination as a kid?
Hell yes.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah. Silver Snail. There were others early on, but it started really early. My dad, as a weekend dad, trying to find things to do, would occasionally like point at comics and go, "Let's pick one, and then you can buy it every month, and we could read it together." So he was reading me X-Men before I could read.
Oh, excellent.
Which resulted in me not really pronouncing the characters' names. properly because my parents are from Hungary, and so I thought Wolverine was Wolverine, and I got made fun of.
Did you say Wolverine?
Like, who the hell is Wolverine? It's Wolverine, idiot. And I thought he meant Schnicked, because that's how my dad read the comics, and I got harassed for that. But I lucked out in that the 3 comics I randomly picked off the rack, that when I was like 6 or 5 or whatever it was, I picked X-Men, Micronauts, and Wonder Woman. And
wow,
Wonder Woman
a varied group.
Pretty much trash, but 2 out of 3 were humdingers that, you know, I lucked into like some of the best comics at the time just at random. And I really just chose Wonder Woman because the show was in reruns and I knew it. But I chose Micronauts because I was obsessed with the toys, even though they were kind of gone by then and it was like flea markets and yard sales. But I picked X-Men because I didn't recognize a single character on that cover. I was already like, Spider-Man, boring. I was like, I don't know any of these guys. I must have this one.
Excellent. It's funny. Micronauts is one of those ones that doesn't come out. Like ROM comes up a lot, and Micronauts is always sort of in that same little microcosm for me. I recently
microcosm. I see.
Yeah. I was so disappointed not to see that. I know there's probably many licensing issues, but when the Ant-Man movie came out, it all took place in the Microverse. I was like, oh man, I would love to see some Micronauts show up there.
Yeah, a little Karza cameo. I didn't do it.
Yeah, well, I'm assuming because I think that's why they haven't redone it, right? Because didn't IDW or someone do comics a redo of it not too long ago? So like I think
that was rights... a big deal, and that was the first one in a while.
Yeah, it didn't last very long.
You know the deal with Micronauts, like as a like, do you know the secret interconnectedness of a bunch of these weird toy brands? So Micronauts was a Japanese toy line that was licensed by a US like toy company to like kind of rejigger and like do you know this? Am I telling you?
No, please do.
So Micronauts, Transformers, and Battle Beasts are all the same toy line in Japan.
Oh, really?
And different companies license them at different times. So Micronauts was licensed early on, and then they started going, okay, little guys, little people, maybe your Walkman and your gun also turn into robots to like fight the little guys. And that was like a later stage. And then the cars were a different line, but a bunch of the like object transformers were actually Micronauts.
Oh, that's
and then they kind of fed back into the Japanese toy line, started continuing, and then they got in. Battle Beasts were an outgrowth of that because that same like rub the hologram kind of tech.
Right.
Over here is licensed by a different company, separate thing, but it was all one thing. I was like, wait, everything I love was from the same like people? Like that was
kind of
bizarre,
an interesting era in Marvel because they would have like the Shogun Warrior like fighting like Godzilla, and they had like the Godzilla comics, and they had all this other stuff. Like there's, to me, around that time period of, I guess it would have been early 80s comics, right? There was 70s. Like 70s, 80s. There were some cool like Micronauts. I went back and I had a bunch of them, and I finally completed the collection of the original run and then the sequel series. But that one, and what was the other one I used to love? Strike Force Morituri, which only had like, I don't know, 32 issues. It was by
I read Strike Force Morituri. I love Strike Force.
Me too. I love that series. Is it Peter Milligan? That's not right. It's not him.
Peter B. Gillis.
Peter Gillis, that's it. Right.
Who I don't know that he'd done anything else. Maybe he was from a bygone, like an era previous to my reading.
Yeah, because Mark Bagley
and Brent Anderson.
Oh, really?
Do Astro City.
Oh, wow. Okay. Because I remember Bagley did some of the later issues, which was kind of a fun surprise for me because I was always a big fan of him.
Yeah, Morituri was awesome.
And it was such a cool idea, and something that could be I think for like a TV show or something, it would be a fantastic concept because you could just cycle actors in and out, and
it's perfect for television.
I know.
Oh wait, someone got a movie gig and doesn't want to be on the show anymore? No problem. You don't even have to secure the concept.
They can just blow up, or they can be killed by the aliens. Either or.
I think the rights in that are a mess too, because it was like an early creator-owned thing.
Yeah.
But like Marvel still has a stake in it, and so neither side can really do anything with it. There are a bunch of these sort of things that are ensnared, like Micronauts. Elementals is another one where it's never going to happen because however it was set up at the time, it's just undisentangleable.
It makes you wonder like what Marvel's sitting on, because I was going through this. There's a little shop here that sells like old comics and stuff, or just whatever people trade in, and I was going through some of their stuff, and they had a bunch of the prestige format stuff. like, you know, when they put out God Loves Man Kills and all that sort of thing. But there's one that had like a super team I'd never seen before or never even heard of before.
Is it the Futurians?
It is the Futurians. I was like, what the hell is this? And I was like, never. I think this one book came out and they were never, maybe they popped up in another series eventually, but they never were seen again. And I was like, there's a rich, full group of characters here that just seem to have fallen by the wayside.
It was a Dave Cockrum idea that Marvel said, you want to do it? And he was like, okay. They did put out some stuff much later and it wasn't great, but it's so Cockrum. Like Cockrum has such a distinctive character design style. You know, his take on the Legion, which then rolled into X-Men, like the all new, all different X-Men, like which that DNA is still in a lot of the characters' costumes. And Futurians is like, it would fit perfectly. It feels like something that came out from 1976 all the way to 1994, but it's just this one graphic novel and a handful of bits and bobs. And of course, now he's passed, so there won't be any more. But yeah, Futurians, that screamed at me from the shelf because it was my guy. Like it was Cockrum, but characters I didn't recognize.
And cool designs. Like they were well designed. It was cool. It was a neat little book. They came across something else too that was like some kind of, I wish I had it with me, but it was some kind of a showcase book that had a bunch of short little stories about real life stuff by different big comic artists and writers at the time. Like 8-10
Is it one of those like the big book of blah blah blah?
No, it was something to do.
DC would do these.
I have to think. It was a Marvel thing, but it was like a summer spectacular or story spectacular. So I'll have to find it. But it was just
Marvel
one of these.
Seems to kind of ebb and flow between licensed and non-licensed, and we've been on a long stretch of not licensed since like Gi Joe Transformers in the 80s, Shogun Warriors Godzilla in the 70s, Star Wars in that time too, and then they kind of stopped until recently. In the last 5 years, Conan, Predator, Alien, they're back up with the licensing. In that time, it was Dark Horse, who kind of made their name doing all the like RoboCop, Terminator, like books. But and then finding all this ebbs and flows back and forth.
And like I love how like because IW was the one forever that would do all of this stuff, and then they would find these weird ass combinations where it'd be like, you know, Predator versus like what was the one I just saw? Well, like Planet of the Apes meets Star Trek, like. All right, let's just throw that together, you know, and to see how that pans out.
They're like Transformers and Ninja Turtles. You're like, okay, and Ghostbusters. What?
Yeah, and let's throw G.I. Joe in there as well. What's happening? That's funny. Cool. So I guess as far as growing up with the single mom, as you mentioned, and the weekend dad, I love that the weekend dad got you into the comics. That just seems like the seminal, like I do something with this kid, you know, for this time period, give him some comics to read.
And he was the one who could draw. He was a draftsman.
Oh, really?
And he did graphic design. So my dad grew up in Budapest, Hungary, and so he was 10 at the end of World War II, and he was 21. In 1956, when the Hungarians tried to free themselves from Soviet rule and then were brutally put down. And that's when he left. So he came to Canada at age 21, but he had been doing graphic design in Budapest, and he was able to parlay that into a career as a draftsman.
Oh, cool.
So he's given me he's now passed, but I have his scrapbook of all the like graphic design logos and like cowboy drawings he would make. And like, he was more like me than I realized until much later, because these kind of traumatic events kind of change you. And he wasn't particularly creative person, you know, by the time I met him, but he had this in his sort of secret history. And he would draw cowboys and write novels and make stories and do graphic design. But when I showed interest in drawing, he was right there with it. And he taught me a lot. Like he was encouraging and patient, and he taught me things. Like he taught me, and this is the example that always comes to mind, is like he taught me how to measure proportions and count heads, which, you know, he taught me at age 5 how to do that. And so I could draw circles around my peers after that. But this is something that like many people don't even encounter until they do life drawing, you know, as adults or college students. That was just one thing, but like he took a lot of time and care and kind of like did that with me. That kind of, I think, also helped the art bug and the drawing bug take hold.
Wow. And even just being a graphic designer at that time period, right? Like that would have been very interesting, because as one now, I know what the industry looks like and what the tools available are. Back in the day with those, like, you'd have to hand draw everything and those big cameras, and like it was a whole other world.
Yeah.
Way...
Paste up and all that stuff, right? And then also like the paste up that we are familiar with here, that is like, Eastern Europe in the 50s would have been like 3 generations more primitive than whatever that was. So I don't even know. I can't even imagine how these were reproduced or whatnot, but I'm very happy to have those. I have a bunch of these things from his art drawer that are treasured relics for me.
So when did you, like, was comics always the end goal for you as a kid? Was that what you're heading towards, or?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, drawing was the thing that I did all the time, and it made me feel good. And other aspects of life were hard, and I mean, drawing's sometimes hard, but it just made sense that should be the thing that I aim to do with my life, since I already do it all the time, and I find it incredibly rewarding. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I mean, I was obsessed with comics, like, and I was also like, I had the brain where like, the kids that would kind of like hassle me in the schoolyard when it was Wednesday, or Friday. It used to be Friday. When it was Friday, they'd be like, "What's coming out?" And I had the schedule memorized. I could be like, Marvel Universe, Star Wars, Spectacular Spider-Man, not amazing, and Uncanny X-Men. Oh, what about next? Well, this. As long as nothing's late.
Yeah.
I had this like a clear obsession. And then there was a point where I was like, I got tired of superheroes. By grade 6, I was above it all. I got obsessed with Star Wars, and I was like, nah, man, it's science fiction, and it's
this
not
is the future.
Who's the main character? And I'm like, there is no main character. It's a whole universe. And people would be like, what? No, but what's the? I'm like, it's a universe. And I started working on like sci-fi stuff all the time. I got sick of superheroes, and then, I don't know, comics caught up with me, I guess. They got better. And then, the 90s happened, which was terrible in some ways, but there was an art revolution. Art Adams brought me back. And, that was a whole middle school love affair for me. Like, and so other than that, and then I never let go of sci-fi either. I was just like fantasy, sci-fi, superheroes, all of them. And then I got into like indie comics, and I was like, that's awesome too. Like, it was just all of it. But it always kind of came back to comics in some form or the other, because that was like, I could draw something, and it was kind of like the object. At that time, video or animation, all that stuff felt very far away and inaccessible in a way that is hard to grasp now, when everybody has an amazing HD video camera in their pocket and can instantly post and edit. That was not the case in 1984, 5 or 6 or whatever it was. So I was just like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to draw. I have story ideas. Too impatient to write? I'll just draw the characters. Sci-fi, fantasy, superhero, indie slice of life, all of it.
Do you remember what the first indie comic you saw that turned you on to the indie world was? I was trying to think about this the other day, because me and a friend were talking about, like, when you're a kid, it's always what you find on the rack at the grocery store. We didn't have a comic store where I grew up, and the nearest one was like 3. There's like one a convenience store in town that sold stuff. But as far as going to a store that was a comic store, that was Strange Adventures in Halifax, and that was 3 hours away from me where I grew up. So now it's a place I visit regularly, and I get my comics from them now. But like as a kid, I think it was probably somebody. Maybe like might have been Dave, it might have been someone else, because I was in high school when I met him, when he was going to university, that introduced me to some cool stuff that like I hadn't seen before. And what was
the gateway drug for you?
I feel like it might have been Scud, the Disposable Assassin.
Oh
yeah. I feel like that was mine. Or Bone when I was really young. Bone was my favorite thing ever. Yeah, but that seemed to have become mainstream in a way when Scholastic got it. But like when it was just a cartoon book, Bone and Gru, but Gru was a Marvel comic at that point too, so it wasn't really like really far out there. But I think like Scud was the first one that felt kind of dirty and different, and like this cheap little thing that was like, I don't know, unique and something that you could just hold on to.
This is what Ed Piskor and Jim Rugg would call outlaw comics.
I want to have Ed on the show sometime. I reached out to him, but he hasn't answered me. So I
noticed you had Jim. I was flicking through today, and I don't know if I've listened to that one, but
he was great. He's really cool. I recently got his Hulk book and the Grand Design book and read it, and it's so cool. It's such a great, fun way to remember all the past Arrow stuff, but also like remind yourself of where it's spawned. Go ahead.
I read Ed's X-Men one. I haven't read the Hulk one, but I read the X-Men one. Yeah, I mean, I love their show. It's so good to put on while you're drawing to get you juiced or keep your ass in the chair.
Yeah.
Certain kind of creative brain like me always needs what I call the intentional distraction, so that I don't compulsively find unintentional and derailing distractions. So yeah, putting stuff on where people are drawing or talking about drawing is really good. Like keep ass in chair for me.
I find it tough to do that, to draw with. So I did some little indie comics and stuff, nothing crazy, just stuff I've self-published and sold around. But I always found it like music was usually my go-to. Was I found it sometimes I try to watch TV shows and stuff. I could do that when I'm inking or coloring, but for some reason penciling I just need to focus on it. I don't know why.
I hear you. It was music for a very long time, and then once I started working professionally, it was like you had to sit for so many days and nights over and over that eventually the music was just not. It was like too background, and so then luckily podcasts arrived around that time. Like I know Ed and Jim's show is visual, but some of it is pretty auditory. I can't watch TV. I know some people who use TV that way, or they put on stuff they've seen a million times. I had some success with like procedurals where everything's verbal, so you don't have to look at the screen, but I get captured really easily. So yeah, TV never worked for me. It has to be like audiobooks or podcasts or music. I'm still processing your question. I think as to what my gateway drug was for indie, it might have been Tank Girl. It might have been. I guess I'm wearing the shirt.
Yeah, I see the Love and Rocket shirt. That's fantastic.
It might have been Sandman. These all sort of happened around the same time. I mean, Sandman was a DC product, but it was different. I don't know. I was the right age that I was just entering like adolescence. Right when like Vertigo was breaking off. Like I was a little too young to catch Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen as they were coming out. But I got into both of them before I turned 20. But when I was like 13, 14, looking for something with more teeth, more grit, I was already into like punk and post-punk and like alternative music. And so suddenly there were a bunch of comics that vibed with that. And and I was the perfect age. And so like Vertigo became Vertigo when I was, I think, 14 or 15, but it had already been bubbling up. So there was a point where I was like, Sandman, Love and Rockets, Cerebus, and Akira, the reprints that Epic was doing. Like there was a point where I again dropped all the superheroes and only bought those 4 things. Art Adams wasn't doing enough to keep me hooked into the superheroes. Come
on, Art,
of course,
pick it up.
When that one annual came out every 2 years, I would grab that with gusto. But monthly, Cerebus, Akira, Sandman, and Love and Rockets. That quadrilogy, those were the 4. I don't know which one came first, honestly. But that was sort of my indie. That was my indie diet.
I remember. It's funny because there is several things in the the Vertigo area that like turn you on to like it's almost that alternative feel because the stories are so different, but it is still under a mainstream banner. But I remember like Animal Man, Grant Morrison's Animal Man was a huge one for me. And Transmetropolitan, which Dave and his roommate Colin turned me on to. That's how I got into Warren Ellis and became like a huge fan there as well.
Shade the Changing Man was a big one for me.
It was
the Jamie Hewlett covers because I knew him from Tank Girl, and I was like, oh wow, I know this guy, and that was another one.
That's
that sort of ran parallel to Sandman.
And some Thing, all that stuff. Like it was just all very different and interesting. It was kind of a fun time. There's a lot of like. You think about the time the subversive comics from before that, which were like Howard the Duck or something, which were like very interesting, and it was like somebody that's playing in a mainstream pool but doing stuff that was really outside of what everyone else was doing. So, but when the indies came around, it was like the world was open and anybody could do anything, and it was just so cool to actually. Another one I just remembered that I used to love was Alex Robinson. Box Office Poison was one he did, which was like
I love that.
Yeah, me too. And I think I discovered it through Wizard, but
yeah. I read the trade late. I think it was I didn't get into it until it was already collected in the phone book.
That's when I got it, yeah.
But somebody put it in my hands, a friend of mine, and it affected me like very few comics had. It felt like it was operating on a whole other level of like truthiness about life. And again, I think I was the right age. Like I was in my mid-20s. I'd been in a couple of tumultuous. I dated a girl who was just like that girl, the crazy girl, like in the back half of the book. Yeah. And I handled it just as poorly as he did. So it vibed. I guess it vibed because it really mirrored personal things I'd gone through. But I still think about that, and I think about. Going to get into the weeds about comic book technique. There's a thing he did where he would open a chapter where he would ask each of the characters a question, and it was a 6-panel page, and each panel was one of the characters answering that question, and I'd never seen that before, and I loved it. And it was a great way to convey characters divorced from the needs of plot. Like even in an indie slice of life, there is a plot. It doesn't ring out the way like Hero's Journey does, but there is a plot, and there's a limited amount of space, and there are mechanical things that need to happen. But that was a kind of a cheat where he could give you a little bit of character flavor and get you to know the characters, divorced from the needs of like, oh, this page they have to do this, and then I have to get, and it was almost like documentary film in comic book form. And years later, Bendis would do a similar thing in Powers, where they were doing the legwork of detective work, where they were asking questions around, and he would have these whole page spreads where different people were answering. It wasn't as that was more plot driven. But in my head canon, I was like, Bendis probably read this, and then he took it into the mainstream. Then he was doing it in Marvel Comics, because he was doing it in his Avengers run a few times, in his Spider-Man run, and that was me tracking like that was a concept that started in indie, and then Bendis as an indie guy took it all the way to the mainstream. And now I'm reading Marvel Comics, where that technique that blew my indie mind is there in Spider-Man or whatever, right? So totally to go deep into the mechanics of page design, but that is a thing that delighted me about Box Office Poison, and something I tracked in other books, and just really loved how
I think even his last book, I think it was Tricked, was his last one he put out. Maybe there's one ahead of that, but there's that, which is also fantastic. Like, it's funny because it seems like when I read that, he's probably in his 50s, I'd assume, that guy. But he, like, when I'd read it, it was probably around the same time period. And then his books, whenever I get to read them, seem to catch up to where I am in my life. And then like the problems that people have, it's like, like if it's not me, it's someone I know. So you just kind of sit there and you kind of like are watching this guy go through this sort of like real life situation and make these horrible decisions. And it resonates with you in this way that you've experienced it all before. You're like, I've definitely either felt this or know somebody that I've seen do this. And it's so relatable. It's such I wish he had a greater output. It seems like he only does something every so many years, but
it takes time to drill down and pull these authentic things out and translate them into story. Like you can come up with a cool fight scene month after month, and I'm not saying that that's just mechanical, but to actually pull something new from your own lived experience and then translate it, I think takes time.
I guess you need time to live it. Right?
And I think I read Tricked. You saw me turning around because I'm trying to see if it's up on my book.
Well, I think his new one is the one I was thinking of.
Poison,
which is Our Expanding Universe. I think that's the last one I read.
I don't know that one. I got to check that out. I think I read Tricked, and I think it didn't do for me what Box Office Poison did.
Yeah.
And so I don't think it's on the like favorites bookshelf over there, but it wasn't bad. But I think I wanted something that didn't quite do. And I'm curious about this new one though, because maybe it will.
Yeah, I think it came out. I remember reading it when it came out. Just let me take a quick glance here. I want to say it was like 2017 or 2018. It wasn't long ago, but it's cool. Definitely, definitely check it out. It's definitely the aging hipster couple, and where it goes from there. And it's very interesting. It's cool. Right on. So when did so were you like, now that you were making comics, creating comics, what was your first step to get into the industry itself? Like, where did you go after high school?
So I mid high school I changed to an art school, which meant I couldn't walk to school anymore. I had to take the subway and bus for an hour and 15 minutes every day.
Oh wow.
And that meant I was pretty much missing the first hour of classes every day because I am not a punctual person. But it was a really good arts program at this high school. And when I graduated, I went to the Ontario College of Art, and it felt like a giant step backwards from what I had learned in my really solid art high school, to the point where I dropped out. I was fed up. And I found a little like indie comic studio across the street from the Silver Snail, where a bunch of people my age were like trying to like make a go of it. And a lot of heavy hitters in that lineup too, and me. And and learned a lot just from, like, again, this is just before the internet, so a lot of the knowledge that is really easy to find, videos, tutorials, behind the scenes stuff, was really, really hard to come by. Like, you probably heard this from other people, but like finding that script Neil Gaiman wrote in the back of that one Sandman trade was like the one and only comic script you could find anywhere for decades. So this little studio, it continued under different names and different forms and different locations for a few years. And I kind of shifted from college that was giving me nothing, because computers had not arrived there, but I was already freelancing, doing graphic design at a little studio downtown. It was called Desktop Publishing at the time.
Oh.
And I was doing illustration for clip art packages. And so how this worked, this is a story.
This is actually interesting too.
To my students. So actually, I'm going a little bit back. This is grade 12. This isn't quite college yet. I got this gig and I was doing art for clip art. So OAC French, I'm sitting there inking a caribou under my desk, hoping I don't get busted. And how it would work is I would take these drawings down to this studio. They would scan them. They would turn them into like bitmap files. Then they would put them onto floppy disks. And we're talking the 3.5 floppy disk with the little metal thing that like slides aside. Then they would put those floppy disks, so there were like 25 floppy disks, into a box. They would shrink wrap the box. And then that box would get shipped to stores. And if you wanted clip art, you would walk into the store, you would pick a box, take it home, tear it open, pull out the floppy disks, and one by one put the floppy disks in your computer and save them onto your hard drive so you had clip art. So this is pre-internet. This is like the awkwardness of talking about my dad's like Eastern European pay stub. This is our version of that. But yeah. I was making freelance money from my illustration before I graduated high school, even for this hokey thing. And I was my dad comes into this again because he downloaded his entire collection of National Geographics onto me. So I had loads of animal reference because I was doing the wildlife clip art package. And that was like probably my first freelance gig. And then I stumbled across this comic studio after I'd gotten disenchanted with high school. And I continued working for the clip art guys doing more graphic design. We were using Photoshop 2, which is before layers. You would create something in Photoshop, and then you would think about what needed to go on top, and you would open another file and create that. And once you had all of the files, you would import them into another program called Specular Collage that was just layers, but had no drawing tools. And that was Photoshop before layers, my friends. Wow. So that was my side hustle in college. And when I dropped out, I joined this comic studio instead. And, just things like you thumbnail your page small and then photocopy it and then lightbox it onto the board so you're not figuring it all out on the actual Bristol. What? That's allowed? Oh my God. Like that was like arcane knowledge from the mountaintop. That again is like it's so basic now. Now it's like, don't even sketch on paper, do it digitally. And like we've come several orders of magnitude past that. But at the time, that was a gold nugget that changed everything. And those are the kinds of things I could learn from this studio. So we had Steve McNiven in there. He's a Halifax guy.
Oh, I know him. Yeah, I've met him.
Francis
I don't think you,
Yep. Francis Maniple was the co-op kid.
Wow.
So he was younger than all of us. We'd go to cons and he couldn't come with us to the bar because he was too young. But he was always amazing. Like he had who else that became after me, Adrian Alfona and Valentine Delandro were both in that same continuum. But while I was there were more people who went on to do stuff. I'm just blanking right now. They're probably listening going, dude. But
you're
Francis
get a frosty email.
Francis and McNiven were like the superstars in waiting who were in this studio, but there were definitely more people who went on to do stuff too. And so I've just banged around there for a few years. I'd get like a little freelance here, little freelance there, not in comics. The promise was always one of the guy who started the studio had worked in Anaheim for Rob Liefeld's Image Studio, and he was always promising he could hook us up with stuff, but never quite happened, at least not for me. But it wasn't until I went to San Diego, I guess 98, 97, 98, 99, something like that. I don't remember. And I was shell-shocked. You know, Jay Torres had joined the studio. He was already doing indie comics, but then he's like, you should just go to an American convention and you will see that you will get work. And I was like, what? Like cross the border? Like it's scary. It's far. I don't know. So we went to San Diego and I started walking. I was like, you know, again, we've all been to a million cons, but at the time I was like, I felt like I'd entered the Emerald City. Like I didn't know what the hell was going on. And I was like, they're right there. Like Matt Wagner's right there. Michael Lark is right there.
It's eye-opening. It's
publishers, Marvel's here. Like I couldn't even. And so I remember showing, I had a weird, I was like, Caliber felt like the right vibe for me. You know, Caliber Press?
I do, yes, yep.
Yeah. And I was like, that feels doable. I was like, they might give me a pinup or
the
something.
The bar is low enough.
What feels like a good place to start.
Yeah,
you know?
For
like
sure.
Marvel, not there yet. Forget about it.
Yeah.
And so I went up to Caliber, and I think I had some photocopies and like color print. I don't know what I had, but I showed them my portfolio, and they were like, "Hey, this is really great. Do you have anything to give me?" And I was like, "Give you?" And they're like, I was like, I'm hoping you give me something. And they're like, no, like leave me some samples behind so I can take them back. And I was like, hold on, I'll be back. And I had to like run with my friend to find like a Kinko's.
Yeah.
Like we're like desperately like printing stuff out and stapling it and going, I didn't know you had to do that. So I was like panicked. And like the next day I came back and I was like, here you go. I was like, okay, cool, thanks. And I was like heart pounding. Like that was like foreign city, you know, like I don't know my way around anywhere, like limited cash. I was like, gotta go make copies of everything now. But we did it. And they called me back a few months later to do a pinup for they're doing like a King Arthur pinup gallery thing. And they're like, we want you to do a pinup. And I was like, couldn't believe it. So I did Mordred, and I ink washed it. I was really hot for Travis Chare's ink wash paintings he was doing for a bunch of covers around then. So I did this ink wash painting. I picked Mordred because I thought, okay, he's kind of the villain knight. I can get all like spiky and crazy with him. And I poured like so much love into that. And then they're like, hey, we're doing a line of books based on King Arthur. You want to do one? And I was like choking on my coffee, like I couldn't believe it. Yeah. And they're like, well, we can't really pay you much. And I was like, okay.
Oh, there's the second. There's the other foot. Yeah.
And I was like, $500? I'm like, a page? They're like, no, for the whole book. I was like, okay. So I did this King Arthur one shot, and I thought I'm going to paint that too, even though I was already only being paid. Like they didn't ask me to do that, but I did a painted book for $500. But of course, I was really late on that. But they were also like, it's no real deadline. They're all separate. They come out whenever. I did get it done, and I did hand it in, and it did come out, and that was kind of my first comics thing.
It's a hell of a portfolio thing, though. Like a painted, like a hand, like you know,
the gray tone
for skill. Yeah, but still, like that's like that ink wash. That's the incredible attention to detail. At least you have a finished product that you can show off to people now. You can hand people at those conventions.
Well, you know what? And I didn't. It's a dumb story, but I don't know if they ever actually paid me. They're like, yeah, you know, we're kind of downsizing. Can't really afford to pay you.
Oh no!
But here, we'll give you a box of copies. And so we drove down to Motor City Comic Con, and they gave me like a box of copies. And I, like you just said, I was like, cool, I'll use that as a giveaway or whatever. And we got a rental van. A bunch of us were there. Francis was there. And I drove down, and I was so exhausted by the time we got there. We went out for dinner, and I left the box of comps in the parking lot. I put it down to like load stuff in the car, and we just drove away. And like 2 hours to home, I was like, oh shit. So I really got nothing for that.
Wow.
But it made me feel like I could do it.
Yeah.
It was a real, like, there's something to be said. And I give this advice to my students, where sometimes they'll be like, hey, can I ask your advice? I got this guy asking me to do a logo or do a character. And, you know, they asked me how much I want. And I said this, but they're only going to pay me this much. And I was like, screw you. And I was like, this early in your career.
Yeah.
And there's a point where you have to stop this. But right now, it is more to your benefit to just do the thing.
Yeah.
Whether it's $200 or $300 is not going to make a meaningful difference in your life. But going through the process of dealing with a client and working on something and taking it to completion is far more valuable.
Yeah.
And having a portfolio that is like, and this is published, is far more valuable. And there will be a point where you will have to change that and start saying, no, I'm worth more. But it's not right now. It is more to your benefit to do the thing. And it's more to my benefit to do the thing. So I started taking these pages around, and everybody was like, hey, cool, really nice, but I'd love to see you, like, what your work would look like if you were working for a comics publisher. And I was like, this is for a comics publisher. And they're like, oh, really? Because it's like fantasy.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, okay, it's not Love and Rockets indie, and it's not a superhero, so this must be your own shit. And I was like, no, I had a script. I had an editor. And they're like, oh, like they didn't believe me. They're like, well, I'd like to see you work with like mainstream stuff and see what you do. I'm like, this, okay, fine. So that didn't really open many doors really directly. It was a couple of years until I got a fill-in on Legion. Olivier Coipel, early Olivier Coipel, he was doing Legion.
Yeah.
And I got a fill-in on that. And then a little momentum started to build up, but it was still, comics was spotty. What happened was, and I guess this is where the fantasy stuff is useful, because comics people were scratching their heads going, barbaric. Like it was 2001 or 2002. Like there were no fantasy comics. I mean, there still kind of aren't. There are many more now. It was still superheroes and everything else, which probably meant Vertigo type stuff or indie slice of life. And that was it. But I did have this pinup that I lavished the love on. And I showed my work to Wizards of the Coast at the next con I went to. And they were like, you should do stuff for Dungeons and Dragons. And I was like, yes, please. So they took my samples, which I had this time because I knew. And they called me to start doing magazine illustrations for, it wasn't Dragon Magazine right away. It was like, they had a bunch of others like Polyhedron and a couple of other things. And so I was doing spot illustrations for Wizards of the Coast all through my early comics was like one a year, couple of pages, but I had regular consistent work from Wizards of the Coast from like 2002 to about 2007. And I worked on D&D magazines, eventually got a dragon cover, which was a feather in my cap. And then started getting D&D Forgotten Realms. They launched this new, I don't know how deep your D&D knowledge is, but they launched a new set, Eberron.
Yep.
I did a lot of Eberron stuff, and then some actual mainstream D&D. And I was always like, give me Dragonlance. How about Dragonlance? And we're not really doing Dragonlance right now.
That was my favorite growing up. I love those books. I read every book when I was a kid. Every single one.
Never did fucking drip of Dragonlance, but Forgotten Realms, that was adjacent. I read some Forgotten Realms book. It was kind of a thrill to draw some of those characters. And then Star Wars RPG. I kept going, hey, how about some Star Wars? And they're like, you're too fantasy. I'm like, what does that mean? Like,
yeah, don't put me in a box.
A lightsaber is just a sword. So I was like, what if I color it digitally? So that's how I got into digital coloring. And then I did a bunch of Star Wars gaming art, which of course was a massive like nerdgasm thrill. And then they launched a whole new game, which was kind of like, it must have been like based on, like inspired by like Buffy and all that stuff that was popular at that time. It's called D20 Modern. So they were doing their open source D20 system. So like D&D was D20, the OG D20. The new Star Wars was all D20. The idea was like, if you learn the rules for one game, you could play them all. So D20 Modern was like Monster Hunters in the modern world. It was like D&D monsters, but an urban setting. And you were like kind of Harry Dresden, sort of like modern mages, like sort of Shadowrun if it wasn't in the future kind of thing. I did a bunch of those and a bunch of covers for those. I really love that because that's kind of where my actual like interests lay. I got to design stuff. I got to draw, contemporary urban magic people. That was a big thrill. And then all the while, a little bit of comics here and there. And then I guess iCandy was the next big thing. But I'll stop talking so you can ask.
No. This is great. It's nice when people are forthcoming with it instead of sometimes when you talk to folks, you have to like pull the information out of them. And it's nice when people are open books because it just makes my job a whole lot easier. Oh, that's super cool. Dragon takes me way back. Like I used to collect those. I never really played D&D growing up, mostly because I didn't have anyone to play with. Like, my brother is 5 years older than me, and you're right about being like solitary as a nerd and kind of finding almost a resolve, if it will, or at least the dedication to pull through and keep working on projects. Because what else are you gonna do? You sit there and you watch cartoons, or you can sit there and draw, and it's one or the other. So the drawing is where a lot of that came into it, and so Dragon was like my like, here's fantasy art I get to enjoy. I knew nothing about all the Dungeon Dragon stuff, but I just loved the fantasy art stuff. So I used to pick up the magazines and get old copies of it whenever I could find it, the used bookstores and stuff. And so that's really, really cool. That's really neat. You had to be involved with that. It's funny that it's making a comeback in a way. Like, I know D&D's always been around, but in
a big way, because people our age are now playing it with their kids.
Yeah, and I got friends that are like getting into it now.
Too.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I got friends that are getting into it now. Like I'm 38, but I know guys that are in their 40s that are like, I think I want to get into that. And they're like, do you want to do it? I'm like, yeah, I'll give it a shot. Why not? Like, but one thing I just been getting a lot of ads for lately is because Palladium Books is putting back out the Ninja Turtles RPG. There's a big Kickstarter going out for it right now.
Yep, I totally know what you're talking about.
I have them all already, but I'm still considering buying these ones because they're just new editions with all these new color versions and updated art and stuff. It just looks amazing.
I have been getting those ads as well. And the funny thing is that I didn't play much D&D. Like, I was aware of it. I read Dragonlance. I had a couple of books, played a little D&D, but Palladium was my drug of choice when it came to RPGs in middle school. And it was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that got me there. So like I had a friend who was kind of more indie than me. He had an older sister who was like channeling that stuff down. So like he got me into the Dead Kennedys when all my peer group was like listening to New Kids on the Block, and the original black and white TMNT. The minute the headbands changed colors, we were out, because we were like reading they were reprints. Like, we weren't so in on it that we were there when the first printings, but trade paperbacks and stuff, and that got us into that game. And Palladium, as you know, like the D20 system happened later. You play one Palladium game, is the same system for all of their games, and they had Robotech, they had a fantasy setting, and they had Heroes Unlimited, which is a superhero
I played
game.
That when I was young. Rifts too was them, right? Rifts. Yeah.
And Rifts came later, yeah.
Okay.
But here, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to Heroes Unlimited to Robotech gave me like the indie, the superhero, and the sci-fi. They had a fantasy one too. By the time Rifts was coming out, I was aging out of it a bit. That's more of an indictment of myself, not the system or anything. But Palladium was like the game I played the hell out of, more than D&D. It's funny that you mentioned it, because I was like, I'll just skip over that and talk about the D&D related to my work. And then you're like, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Palladium. I'm like, yep, that's the one. That is the one I actually played.
Well, the Transdimensional Turtles one and the After the Bomb series were the ones that I was like, because there's so much cool art from like it wasn't Laird that was doing the art in it, was it? Was it Jim Lawson?
All different people.
Yeah, Jim Lawson did a bunch of it. Yeah.
Yes. So Mutants Down Under.
That was the one. That was the one, yes.
Entirely drawn by Lawson.
Yeah.
And that is the only one that I kept. I still have it. Somebody mentioned it the other day, and I took a bunch of photos and sent it to them, because somebody was talking about Lawson, and I was like, do you know about this? And they're like, no. And so, that is, Lawson is the man. He's my favorite. He only drew an issue or two, but
I have, I think After the Bomb, the Roadhogs one, and the Mutants Down Under one, I think, are what I got. But it was so cool. Like, each volume was like a different continent, and you get like all these different animal human hybrid things. It was just such a cool book, and I'm glad that it's making a return. It makes you want to dust them off, and because I think the Kickstarter was only for the Transdimensional one and the original TMT of the Strangeness ones. So I definitely have those two already, but there's still this part of me that's like, I could spend a little money and get some cooler versions, but I think I might just stick to the old ones and try to bring it back through those. It'd be fun.
Yeah, that was Rift 1.0 basically. Like Transdimensional, After the Bomb, and TMNT are basically the framework that became Rift, and then just a little bit of Robotech in there for the giant robots.
Well, it was so cool because now you could just like, there's no limits to what you could do with your gaming, right? You could just travel to a different reality, and now you're in now there's giant robots. Like, so it just opened up this wide world of like, everything was on the table, which is pretty cool, especially when you're in a game like a role-playing game where it's just your imagination can go as far as you want.
100%.
Yeah, that's awesome. So when did Marvel eventually come knocking?
It took a while with Marvel. I got into DC first. I did that Legion fill-in, and Abnett Landing went, we've got this creator on book. Do you want to draw it? And I was like, yes. It was called iCandy,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like, she's a video game character come to life. And so technically, I still own that with Abnett and Lanning, but I don't think anything's happening with it. So
those are two cool guys to be connected. That's a cool guy to be connected to.
Yes, and so I did not set this
it's
up.
Okay, that's good. It's even easier.
My stuff over here. So this is not my art. This is the cover artist Scott Iwahashi, but this is iCandy. So they had this. They wanted her to be kind of like, I can't think of an analog, but I took it in a kind of a Ghost in the Shell direction because I was all into manga, and I drew and colored 6 issues of this series, a 6-issue miniseries. I mean, with maybe more, but it didn't really make a splash. But yeah, I was like, I thought I could be Josh Middleton, just like with Caliber. I was like, I can do it all. Eventually, I had to pull Udon in to help because I was just getting swamped and drowned. Penciling, inking, and coloring. My first series, like, I can't believe they said yes to me. But I'm.
Probably a great money saver for them. So.
Well, no, DC paid me a proper rate for all of them.
Okay, well, that's good.
Unlike Caliber. But yeah, I mean, that was a trial by fire, man, let me tell you. And from there, I did bits and bobs. I think I started doing covers shortly after this. There might have been a fill-in or two that I'm not remembering, but I started getting covers at Devil's Due. And then that looped back into covers at DC, and based on listen, I mean, comics are hard. They're hard and they're painful and they take a lot, and I love them, but I'm more of an illustrator at heart. The fact that I had a good run with RPG art, once I started getting cover gigs, that was sort of more the thing for me. So I did a bunch of covers for DC, or the Outsiders and Action Comics here and there. And then I got on this Green Lantern book called Ion. And I don't know, am I missing something in there? Oh, Checkmate was a big one for me because that was the first time I was hired to do the cover for a book I actually read. Yeah. Something I was already a fan of. I guess I was reading Legion on and off, but that was a mind blower. And all along this time, I'd go to conventions and I'd be like, hey, Marvel, hey, Marvel, hey, Marvel. And I kept getting emails from their talent guy who was like, hey, that last cover you did was really great. We should do something. I'm like, yes, we should. Drop it. And then
up to you.
Like, hey, man, loving what you're doing. Drop me a line. I was like, okay, drop him a line. Nothing. I was like, okay. And then it was at a New York Comic Con. I guess I gave them the 10th package, and I got asked to do a short in a monster book called Legion of Monsters, and it was a character from the 70s called Satana.
Oh yes, yeah.
That was my first thing for Marvel.
Wasn't it the son of Satan's sister? Is that who am I thinking of? Or am I getting
they are both the children of the devil. So
okay.
So he wasn't in it. It was a solo story. And the person who wrote it did not know how to write a comic script.
Oh.
Great. I'm not going to name names. You can look it up if you want, but they have a successful career in other media. And so I sent a script and I was like, panel 1, panel 2, panel 3, panel 4, panel 5, 8, 9. I'm like, wow, this is a dense page. 12, 18, 26. I was like, oh, they're just there's no page breaks.
There's no pages. They're just giving you all the panels.
It's just I'm like, oh, okay. And the editor's like, hold on, we're going to reformat this. Don't do anything. I ended up having to basically, not write, but there was this extended sequence where they were just like, some stuff happens. And it was the most open script I'd ever gotten. So I had to choreograph an elaborate fight scene in hell, which was kind of fun. I was up for it. I'm not actually complaining. And I guess they liked that I was game for that, because then they offered me NYX, which was a second situation where I was offered to work on a book that I loved. And Josh Middleton's NYX came out. That was a book unlike anything else at the time. And I remember holding it in my hands going this is a different kind of comics, because it was Marvel, but it was much more like an indie comic.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is shortly after bankruptcy, new Marvel. It was a thing. It was Joe Quesada had brought the Marvel Knights thing to all of Marvel, and Alias had come out, and then that had come out. And I remember being like, wow, things are really different. Like I was a Marvel kid, but I was not reading many Marvel comics in the 90s up until Marvel Knights and then this. And then they asked me to work on that book of all books. I couldn't believe it. Like that was dream come true.
It's amazing.
And so yeah, so that was the main like interior, that was the main comics that I drew for Marvel. And then I was able to parlay into covers, and then I just was kept busy with that ever since.
That's awesome.
X-23, I guess the first time around was my regular gig rolling off that, because Marjorie, who wrote it, had gotten the new X-23 series. And she and I had a vibe. And still one of my favorite cover runs, because if the editor wasn't giving me feedback, I could just talk to Marjorie and be like, what's the next arc going to be? She's like, Captain Universe. I'm like, okay, I'll just start working on some sketches for that. And so it was the only time in my career where I was not only on time, I was ahead.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Because I had the pipeline to the author, and we were friends, so we would talk, and I'd pitch her things, and she'd be like, oh yeah, I'll do that instead. That's cool. And very, very rewarding run.
Well, that's interesting to me about the cover thing, because like I've always been kind of interested in the shifting of comic book covers over the years, but in the mainstream anyway. Like back when I first started reading, probably in the early 90s, well, like late 80s, early 90s, early 90s would have been when I was more cognizant of what I was reading. It'd always be, if it was Spider-Man was fighting Kraven the Hunter, it would be some kind of Kraven would be holding him, it'd be something relevant to what's going on in the series. And then at some point, I want to say it's around the Ultimate Universe thing, but probably a bit before that, comics just became covers for pinups. Like it was just a cool version of the character in a different way, and usually had little relevance towards the story inside.
As I understand it, that was a post-bankruptcy mandate to try to generate licensable images.
Oh, that makes sense. I never thought of it that way.
So back in the day, DC, for instance, very famously around 1980, they got Jose Luis Garcia Lopez to do a whole bunch of licensable images. Mm-hmm. And up until like the early 90s, any DC bed sheets or candy or anything would have those images. And it was like kind of superpowers, like the toys with stars.
Yeah.
And he gave these iconic poses of all the characters, and if anybody wanted to make something DC, they would show them the catalog and they would pick something, and that was like the licensed art.
That makes sense. I've never thought of that. Wow.
Oh yeah, Marvel's like, we're just got bankrupt, we need to generate like capital. What can we do? Well, we don't have the budget to create a bunch of licensable art, so for the next however many years, like our covers will be all iconic shots of our characters that we can also license, and that was the thing. So that was that. And that was why.
That is eye-opening, because I always assumed it was because there's this run for a long time, and comics still do it, where they will like just keep renumbering things at number one to try to get people in so they don't feel like they can't catch up. So I'd assume that it's almost like TV shows that have standalone episodes, like X-Files or something. It's more accessible because someone just turn it on and watch the episode, not have to know all the history of what's going on in the show to do it.
But that wasn't Ultimate Comics at the time. It was very interconnected, and
it was, but like the cover, you wouldn't know it by looking at the cover, right? That's why
sometimes I'd be like, do I have this one? I don't know.
Yeah,
it's like this one's Ultimate Spider-Man with his left arm raised, and this one's Ultimate Spider-Man with his right arm. Okay.
Yeah.
The art was good, but yeah, that was a little confusing. And it's sort of like, as cover artist, like mantra, one of the things is like never have two covers that are concurrent, like too similar. Use different color scheme, use different whatever. I still think about 2 Checkmate covers I did that were nothing alike in terms of subject matter, but both of them had strong red backgrounds. And one was like 18 and one was 19. I still cringe. Like if I made it like it just feels like I committed a sin, because that at a glance, somebody might go, I have that one. You never want to do that. And there was all the renumbering things came later. Like we're talking Ultimate. The Ultimate line really was big with the iconic covers, but I think everything had this mandate for a while.
Yeah,
and
that makes sense.
Where it changed. There was a point where I remember I submitted a cover sketch, and they're like, "We're kind of doing story-based covers now." And I was like, "Well, it's story-based." Like it was an arc began where X-23 was teaming up with the Fantastic Four. So I did this everyone's running at the camera, like, and X-23 is with the FF, and I was like, "This is awesome! I get to do the FF." And they're like, "We're not." I think this was. It might have changed before that overall, but I got that note right when Axel Alonso came in.
Oh, yeah.
Which is interesting because he was an Ultimate editor, but they're like, we want to do story-based covers now again. And I was like, okay. So then I did something else for that issue that was very story-based.
I've heard mixed reactions to his reign from people that worked within the industry.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, well, just Darwin, I don't want to speak of someone who can't back up their story, but I remember I talked to Darwin Cook one time, and he didn't have a lot of nice things to say about him. So, but I think it just depends.
Darwin didn't have much nice to say about.
That's true, but he never.
He was not shy about sharing his feelings.
No, he wasn't, and I know he'd had sort of a reputation as a curmudgeon, but every time I talked to him, he was always very friendly and open and very cool.
But his issues with Axel go back way before Axel was editor-in-chief. I think it had something to do with the Marvel Age series,
right?
Like that was like Darwin and company had pitched a concept, and then Marvel had done that concept, and they had pitched it to Axel, and Darwin felt that they just took his idea. Now his idea is what to do with Spider-Man, so it's not so black and white, but that I think made Axel persona non grata forever to Darwin.
Yeah, fair enough. He had a particular bone to pick that just sort of stayed. That makes sense. He was living down here when he passed away, and so I used to run into him at like cons and stuff. And actually one of his sketches I think are up on, I don't know if you can see, probably not, but behind up on the wall there's some sketches there, and the second one over is the Spider-Man he did from 8 years ago.
Oh, sweet.
So,
awesome.
Yeah, so there's a few up there. And I have some.
That is Sienkiewicz portrait of you.
No, this one here
over the gremlin. Yeah.
No, it's actually it's funny that you say that, because it's a friend of mine who's an artist who does amazing work. But I mentioned I do some theater stuff, and I was in a stage version of Frankenstein. So my friend had did a portrait of me as the creature in the play, like with the makeup and stuff on. He also did a huge one of me in pencil that's out in my living room. My wife got for me for Christmas years ago. But his work does remind me of Sienkiewicz, and I did tell him about that, and I'm curious if he actually went to look it up. He's very, very. He also did that Charlie from It's Always Sunny that's up in the corner too.
Nice.
Yeah, he's very talented.
Send me his Instagram. I'm curious to see more.
It's Frew Art, Frew Art.
I might follow this person. This rings a bell.
His name's Stephen Frew. He used to live in Ottawa, but his wife and my wife were friends growing up. So when they moved back to Truro, we became friends. So super cool guy, and it's really unique. I have a lot of his art around the house. Actually, some of it's right here. Thinking about this is great for audio podcasts, but this is one of his.
Oh wow!
And it's another one. I got a few. Every once in a while, he does little sales, and I'll grab a bunch of stuff. Really big fan of this one as well, which is kind of cool.
Is it Frew _art or Frew -art or? I'm not finding it. I'm getting a bunch of Spanish people when I put in Frew art.
FREW?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I spelled it wrong.
Oh, it's all right. I'm pretty sure it's Frew art.
Stephen Frew?
That's him.
Okay, I do not follow him, but I do now.
Awesome. Yeah, check him out. I think it'd be great for cover work too. That's something I should talk to him about, because he's always trying to look for new avenues to do his art.
Holy crap.
Yeah, he did a few pieces for friends. Like, actually, he did one. I don't know if you can see that one. And once again,
let me justify this digression in an audio podcast, guys. Everybody follow Frew Art on Instagram. FREWART.
Yeah,
you will not be sorry. It's like Egon Schiele meets Eric Jones.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm blown away. This guy's awesome. For
Christmas, he gave me that satyr from Pan's Labyrinth in the corner.
Damn,
it's beautiful. I'll send you some pictures when after the show. But he does some amazing work. That's funny you say Sienkiewicz, because I think I said Sienkiewicz. And it's one of those things when you're a kid growing up reading comics and you don't hear other people say the names. You put a name in your head, and then eventually someone corrects you, and you're like, I've been saying this wrong my entire life.
I have one of those names. I know exactly what you're speaking of.
Actually,
I have those names.
How do you pronounce your last name? So when I introduce you in the intro, I do it correctly.
I break it down in my bio. It's 4 words that everyone knows how to pronounce.
Mm-hmm.
And
rush,
off, ski,
and Rushovsky.
Perfect.
All right.
But the way the Eastern European spelling the 4 consonants in a row just tend to just freak
Well,
everyone.
I guess it makes sense with Budapest because it's got the sh noise with
Right.
the S that you don't normally see. So
bingo.
Yeah, it makes sense. So is your mom Canadian?
Nope, she's also Hungarian, but
really
met in North America.
Interesting. Well,
she's from Transylvania, which is politically Romanian but ethnically Hungarian.
Interesting. You say she's from Transylvania?
Yeah, and so is my dad's. So, but I'm Transylvanian on both sides.
Right? I've never met a native Transylvanian. This is amazing.
Well, native is debatable because I was born here.
Oh, fair enough. But like someone directly connected to someone that's from Transylvania. That must be, ever since Dracula, that must be the funnest thing to tell somebody that where you're from in like a social setting, to just have them go off on a tirade and everybody ask you a million questions about Dracula, I'm sure.
Yeah, whenever people post Halloween costumes and vampire costumes, I always hashtag it cultural appropriation and they come at me.
It's like, I knew about Vlad before he was cool, man. That's hilarious. Cool. So, I mean, were your parents supportive of your art journey? I mean, you mentioned your father was your mom cool with you going into the arts?
Yeah. My dad was supportive in a practical sense. My mom was very supportive in the I don't know, in a less practical,
spiritual
sense. Yes, absolutely. You got it. I was looking for a way to say that, but that's exactly it. So my mom, my dad was for a person with an artistic nature in his early life, he was a very regimented, serious, wore a suit every day, briefcase.
Based on where he came from in the war and all that.
Early for everything, like, loved doing tax. Like I don't know. I can't believe I came from him. But my mom was a very free-spirited, warm, gregarious, creative personality. She started her own dressmaking and alterations business, but she also sang and performed in theater. She has very artistic temperament. So for her, she was never like interested in it the way like my dad was. She'd be like, oh, these space people, they all look the same. But the fact that I was motivated to be creative, she totally got and was very on board with, and never was a roadblock in any way, and was extremely encouraging. And
that's fantastic. That's I often have digressions of the show where we talk to artists, and it's rare that you see someone who's although lately it's actually been nice because quite a few of my guests in the past have last little while have all seemingly had supportive parents. Most people, it's like, go get a career and get something expensive, that you
all this have a backup plan bullshit.
Yeah.
Which,
and then do art on the side if you want.
Work is never gonna.
Well, that's it. Sure. I mean, you can go do those sort of jobs. I remember I saw some viral clip that made the rounds a long time ago of Jim Carrey giving some kind of a speech at a school where he said like his dad always wanted to be like a comedian and actor, and he took the safe route and became like a, I can't remember what his job was, but something very basic. And then he got fired from doing that because they downsized after years, and like he had to start his career all over again. Like, you can play it safe and still fail. Like, why not fail?
I saw this happen in real time.
Really?
He got laid off during a contraction, and I saw him scrambling and freelancing and all of these things. And I was like, maybe nothing's certain and you should just do what you want.
Yeah, there isn't really a safe bet, in any industry really. But, it's kind of about what makes you happy, I suppose, or what you can get up every day and do.
I mean, it's his fault. He bought and read me the comics when my brain was a sponge. Like, he has no right to complain about the results.
That's awesome. So what's next for you? What's coming down the pipeline?
What is next for me? Freelance is a little quiet. There's a couple of things actually. Speaking of Frankenstein, the show you were in, I'm in a Frankenstein anthology called Frankenstein Visions.
Oh, I'm definitely reading that.
It is the sequel to Dracula Visions, which is a Slam Press Tomes, local indie publisher. Gorham did the cover for the Dracula one. So a lot of people who have been on this show might be in this book.
Oh, awesome.
It's just artists' interpretations of the iconic character. The Dracula one's out a few years now. Frankenstein's the new one, along with snippets, not the whole text, but snippets from the book. A lot of heavy hitters and humdingers. Just Google Frankenstein Visions. The Kickstarter just ended, a little too late to actually send people there, but it did fund, so it will come out. And I'm sure there'll be ways to get it after the fact. So I'm doing a Frankenstein for Frankenstein Visions. which is I'm having a lot of fun with this piece. It's going to freak out and gross out everybody, I think.
I love it.
Another Kickstarter project is Cauldron magazine. So sort of a horror anthology put out by Sam Noir. And I'm doing the cover for the new one, the soft cover. It's sort of like a throwback to like creepy and eerie and those sort of retro horror magazines. And they have this character who's sort of the host called Satanella. And Satanella is kind of like Vampirella, but kind of like what's that Jim Rugg character? Octobriana. Do you know about October?
Yeah.
It's like a character that's like a character, but
a knockoff of a knockoff, yeah.
But there's also like a bit of kayfabe to Octobriana. Like she was real. It's like they're made up like a bunch of comics, and like it's hard to explain. Mm-hmm. It's like imagine if Grant Morrison had created Vampirella, and there would be this whole meta narrative of like if you read the comic, she becomes more real, and really cool. So awesome. I'm doing the cover to that, which was fun. I did that a while ago, but it's going to be coming out on this. I'm in the process of pitching something with Fred Kennedy, who just had a big hit with his book Dead Romans. But Fred and I have been friends for a long time. He would make a great guest for your show, by the way.
I would love to have him.
He's a radio DJ here in Toronto, but I've known him as a comic creator longer than that. And Dead Romans is really great. Him and Nick Marinkovich did this sort of ancient Rome epic, and Fred is a military history nerd, so he is the guy to do this justice. And we're working on something that we're talking to a couple of publishers about. It's looking good. Cool. But I'm working on that for the time being. I'm drawing a bunch of pages and covers and character art to kind of round out the pitch. So it feels like it's a thing. Technically, it's not, but yet. But I'm definitely working on it like on a schedule as if it were about to come out. I don't want to say too much about it, but
no, fair enough.
Just that it's very different from Dead Romans. It's a 1970s era heist that also involves wrestling.
Oh shit! All right, it's right up my alley. And you mentioned you're teaching. Where does this happen at?
So I teach at Seneca College in Toronto, part of the illustration faculty there. I love it. I can't imagine my life without it. I've been teaching for about 8 years now, but I'm only a couple of years at Seneca. But not all colleges are created equal, and Seneca is a fantastic institution that I could not be happier to be at. We're not going to talk about the other places I've taught, but Seneca gets 3 thumbs up from me. Their illustration program is fantastic. Their animation program is just been rebooted and revamped, and I might be teaching some stuff there. But for now, I teach life drawing, digital illustration, and character design.
Wow.
And happy as a clam. It's really good for me to have another thing. You talked about how you do this and you do that, and I'm the same way. And I didn't know it because for a long time, all I did was comics. And I thought, that's winning. That's great. But the same thing every day just kind of bogs me down. And having something to switch to, something that I must switch to, because a couple of days a week, I have to put on pants and go and teach a class. And I have to think about it the rest of the time. And it's a nice, healthy balance to get lost in work sitting here and then verbalize things and have a immovable deadline at 3:00. I have to show up and teach the class. And at 5:00, it's done. Because all the creative work that I do is much more nebulous in that regard. And so I have a little win to bring back to the Lost at Sea of I'm on page 3 of 26. And, however amazing the thing is, however into it I am, eventually there is this Lost at Sea feeling, particularly in bigger projects. And having another thing to pivot to that is still creative, uses the things I'm best at, but completely different part of my brain, has been very healthy. And I have a third leg in that, is that I also pick and sell vintage clothing.
Oh, really?
And shows twice a year. And that's sort of the third leg. That's, again, a completely different industry, completely different set of faculties, but still dopamine reward, surprise. What am I going to find today? Someone sees what I see and loves that thing they've been looking for, and I made it happen. And so there's other little things, but those are kind of the 3 things.
That's
like
cool.
my shtick is always I'm like Dick Van Dyke and Mary Poppins. Sometimes I do chalk drawings, but sometimes I'm a chimney sweep.
People always ask me, because I do so many different things. They're like, how do you find like what the time? Number one, I say I don't have children. It's a big one. But number two,
me neither.
Yeah. And the other thing I always say, and I have an understanding wife. And the other thing I always say is,
me too. High five.
Yeah. So the other thing I always say is, I'm like a shark. I don't stop swimming until I'm dead. So
there you go. Same.
Just keep swimming. Well, thanks, Kalman. This is so cool to have you on the show, man, and to learn how to pronounce your last name correctly. It's been a dream. So ever since our mutual friend Davin put you in touch with me, I was like, because he's my co-host on the other podcast to do the X-Men one that Adam's been on before, and Dave's been on it quite a bit. Where we watched
I didn't know you did another podcast.
Oh, it's called X-Rated, the X-Men Anime Review Show. So me and Davin, who probably reached out to you because he's a comic nerd as well, and he passed along your info. We watched every episode of the old Fox X-Men cartoon, and we had a bunch of people from the show that have been voice actors, or like Eric and Julia Leewald, who are the show writers on it. We're on. We've had the woman who did the voice of Rogue. We've had the Mr. Sinister, one of the Gambits, different people that have been involved. The woman that did the voice for Storm we had on the show. So we just chat with those people, and then
get to the monorail.
Very nice. She's really cool. They're all been, actually, everybody's been involved. The show's been super cool. But we've had other people related tangentially to comics or X-Men, or just fans have been on the show. Like Dave was on and Adam was on, and like usually if they like certain episodes, they would come on and join us. We just wrapped it with the because we just hit the end of the show where we got to the finale. But we're going to keep it rolling until the next series comes out on Disney Plus.
What about X-Men Evolution?
That's what we're talking about. So right now we're gonna do the movies, and we're gonna do a wrap up for the whole show, like that we've seen so far. Then we're gonna do the X-Men movies. We're gonna start with the Generation X made for TV movie.
Oh my god! I saw
that
when it came out.
Yeah, we're trying. I was like, let's start at the beginning. Let's watch this, because I've never seen it, and it has such a horrendous, reputation that I was like, I think we got to catch this one. So,
have you seen it?
No, I haven't. I'm sure I'm gonna hate it, but it'll be fun and entertaining.
I'm trying to decide if I should tell you things. That's not really spoiler, but
no, it's fine. I mean, I'm excited that Matt Frewer's in it. So I like him, so I'm like, yeah,
Matt Frewer's in it, and so is the blanking on her name. Anyway, the lady they cast to play the White Queen was actually a pretty good bit of casting.
Oh, really?
The costuming was not great, but she was a soap opera actress that I'd seen around, and that was a pretty good casting. Finola Hughes, I think her name was, and
like a Morgan Fairchild type in her heyday. That kind of what I would. Yeah, that's what I would envision.
But yes, a little more milfy, but yes. And the guy who played Banshee was charming, but he looked all wrong. Like, it couldn't even be bothered to dye
I
his
just
hair.
remember the ads in the comics where they're all like sitting there, and the one guy has the big hand that's like coming down, like the dude.
Oh yeah, the special effects for skin were brutal because there was no CGI yet.
Yeah.
There's a sequence where he climbs a wall that is laugh out loud, ridiculous.
Like the Roger Corman Fantastic Four movie, like just that level of like
that level, absolutely.
Awesome.
There are so many effing X-Men. If you're going to get the license and make even a tangential, like secondary X-Men, you do not need to create your own stupid mutants, because there are enough X-Men. So they invented this jackass called Refrax, who's basically Cyclops. Because why?
And they just plan for fraction for his name, Refrax. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
I don't know, but man. Refrax. Bad news.
So good. So we do that one, and we're gonna keep rolling with that. And I really wanted to do but like, because you've already built this brand around the X-Men, it's kind of, we got to stick with it. But like, I want to do the old Silver Surfer cartoon from the
that
90s.
Was good.
So it was so cool. I loved it. Like, it was so unique at the time period.
Odd and eerie, and like Kirby, like more Kirby than anything else that has maybe been on a screen.
Like fundamentally Kirby, like the beautiful designs and like weird early CGI stuff with Galactus and all that. Like And like probably the first appearance of Thanos in a cartoon, I would assume. Like, just
Quite possibly.
Pip the Troll, all those sort of guys. Like, just I love Jim Starlin cosmic Silver Surfer stuff, and it just felt like that and Kirby just squished on a screen, and I was so happy as a kid to watch it. So it's all Disney Plus.
You said you're doing the movies next, but if you do X-Men Evolution and you want someone who has done a lot of X-23 on the episode that created X-23,
you're in. Davin will love to hear that. Yeah, because we are planning on doing that one and Wolverine and the X-Men. In fact, on I don't know if you heard the last episode, I had Stephen E. Gordon on, who directed a bunch of X-Men Evolution, or is it Wolverine? Yeah, X-Men Evolution.
Cool.
And he did.
I read that and I was like, I don't know who that is.
Yeah, he did a bunch of work on that. He worked on Gargoyles. He got out of high school. He got hired to work for Ralph Bakshi on the Lord of the Rings movie. And and then basically like his college people that were trying to help him get a job were like, you already got it. Like, you're making more money than us now. He like working for, and he worked on Cool World and American Pop and a bunch of Bakshi stuff. Like, he's a cool guy, but he did do a lot. He directed like the Ultimate Avengers movie, that the animated one, and he's been connected through Marvel stuff with a bunch of that, doing their
sweet. That's amazing.
Stuff. Yeah, he's a cool guy. But when we were talking to him about it, because I think Davin also got me. I would have to give Davin a producer credit on the show, because he's been sending me people a lot lately. But when he mentioned it, the guy he said something like, "Well, you guys aren't going to," because Davin mentioned about doing Wolverine and the X-Men next, and he goes, "Well, you're going to skip X-Men Evolution?" And now Davin's thinking about doing it, and I think so. I've never seen any of it, so I'm excited to watch it, especially after watching the original show. Seeing something doing the same but different will be interesting. So it'll be very cool.
Sure.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'll tell Davin, he'll be happy to have you, I'm sure. Well, thank you so much, Kalman. And I will. I'm going to send a message around when I get closer to that date. But if you're around when I'm up in Toronto, I'd love to meet up and have a beer in person.
Sounds excellent. Let's do it.
Perfect.
And it's been a pleasure talking.
Oh, thanks, and thanks for being a fan of the show.
Awesome.
All right, catch you soon.
All right, take it easy.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, wasn't that a fun talk with Kalman Andrasofszky? Big thanks to have him on the show. Big thanks for him to teach me a few things about Micronauts and other things that I didn't understand, as well as the reason why comic covers were the way they were for so long, which was makes perfect sense now that I think about it. But until someone explains it to you, it's one of those things you never thought of. So big thanks for having him on the show. I know he'd listen, so hopefully he's able to listen to this one and enjoy it as much as I enjoyed having him on. So if you are tuning in, thanks, Kalman. It was awesome chatting with you, and hopefully I will get to catch up with you when I'm in Toronto. Be sure to tune in 2 weeks' time for our next episode, in which I talk with Ron Randall, who is a comic artist who is involved, a graduate of the Kubert School, who worked on The Unknown Soldier, Sergeant Rock. He also worked on Warlord, Aerox, Son of Thunder. Very famously worked on a couple of issues of Alan Moore's Swamp Thing. And created a character called Trekker, who is very famous, but is unrelated to Star Trek, which is something that's funny, because people assume that if you're a Trekker, Trekkie, it's related to Star Trek, but it is not. An interesting character he created, and very famously kind of brought to the mainstream in its own way. So I'm very excited. He also worked on Justice League Europe for DC back in '92, and that was at its heyday. So I'm very excited to chat with him about that. So tune in 2 weeks' time to hear my chat with Ron Randall. In the meantime, I hope wherever you are in the world, you're doing okay. I know right now in the world it's a period of uneasy and unrest, and a lot of scary stuff happening in the Middle East. Hopefully it is not touching your life, but it's something that you need to think about and form an opinion on. I don't make the show very political, but whenever people are being killed or being hurt or being maimed for no reason, well, for any reasons, it shouldn't occur, but for the reasons that they are, it's mind-boggling and horrific. So my thoughts are with whatever's going on over there, and just be kind to each other. That's the best we can do. So be kind, be nice, love one another, and tune in. Good segue. In 2 weeks' time to another episode of the Graphic Histories Podcast. The Graphic Histories Podcast is a proud partner of the United Federation of Podcasts.